We never kill humans. Not anymore, anyway. I choked on synthetic blood as I dragged myself from the mangled wreckage of the Odyssey, my ship. The crash landing on planet Andoria had shattered both my legs and collapsed a lung. I hacked up more blood onto bioluminescent moss, red spattering neon green, as I fumbled for my medkit. Strange rustling noises echoed from the dense mist-shrouded forest around me. Probably some alien predator, drawn by the scent of my blood and weakness. Just my luck to get marooned on this remote hellhole. My head swam with pain and blood loss as I jabbed a stim shot into my neck with a shaking hand. The injection brought a cold surge of clarity and dulled the agony of my injuries, but I knew it was a temporary fix. I needed shelter before whatever nightmare creatures lurked in this foggy alien forest closed in. As if summoned by the thought, a towering insectoid form materialized from the mist, compound eyes glinting. I scrambled for my plasma pistol with a curse. The bug creature made a series of rapid clicking noises, spindly forelegs twitching, probably telling its buddies that the intergalactic DoorDash order had arrived. I realized with a spike of fear that my universal translator couldn't pass the harsh clicking language. The alien stepped closer, and I raised my pistol with a trembling arm, aiming between its unreadable onyx eyes. "Stay back, I'm warning you." My voice sounded pathetic even to my own ears, weak and thready with pain. Some heroic human explorer I was, about to end up as bug chow on an uncharted planet. The insectoid paused, head tilting as it studied me. Then slowly, carefully, it raised two of its forelegs in an almost placating gesture. It hit me then. This creature wasn't acting aggressive. It seemed curious, even concerned. I lowered my gun slightly, hope stirring in my gut. Maybe this bug could help me. Without allies or shelter, I'd be dead within a day on this hostile alien world. And if there was even a chance these creatures were friendly, I had to take it. I just prayed I hadn't escaped the frying pan only to land in the fire. I'd heard horror stories from other human explorers, aliens who seemed peaceful at first, then captured and enslaved any humans foolish enough to trust them. But I was out of options. Gritting my teeth against the pain, I struggled to stand, to show this alien I came in peace. It was a gamble that might get me killed, but if I was going to survive on planet Andoria, I needed to bet on the tattered shreds of my humanity, the part of me that still wanted to trust, to connect, even to an alien that looked like a giant praying mantis. Forcing a pained smile onto my blood-streaked face, I met that glinting compound gaze, and I took a leap of faith. Leaning on Tharos for support, Will limped into the alien village, his eyes widening at the surreal sight before him. Towering spires of twisted, organic material loomed overhead, like the skeletons of gargantuan beasts. The structures seemed to pulse and shift in the eerie light, as if alive. Smaller, hive-like dwellings dotted the ground between the spires, their surfaces shimmering with an iridescent sheen. Tharos guided Will to a central chamber, a cavernous space that seemed to breathe with a life of its own. The walls were lined with pulsing veins and glowing, pod-like structures. In the center of the room, a group of Andorian elders gathered, their exoskeletons draped in shimmering robes, adorned with intricate glowing patterns. Headdresses of twisting, bioluminescent tendrils crowned their heads, casting an ethereal glow. As Will entered, the elders turned to regard him, compound eyes glinting with a mix of wariness and fascination. Tharos stepped forward, clicking and chirping in the rapid Andorian language, gesturing to Will. The elders conferred among themselves, their hushed tones echoing strangely in the organic chamber. Will's injuries chose that moment to make themselves known, a wave of dizziness and pain washing over him. He swayed on his feet, black spots dancing in his vision. Tharos was at his side in an instant, guiding him to a strange, pulsing seat that seemed to grow from the floor. Will sank into it gratefully, the organic material contouring to his body. One of the elders stepped forward, towering over Will. It spoke, its voice a rasping hiss, the words strangely accented but understandable. "Human, we welcome you to our village. You are injured, and we will provide aid. But you must understand, your presence here is unprecedented. We have never encountered your kind before, and we have much to learn about each other." Will nodded, his throat suddenly dry. An Andorian attendant approached, offering a cup filled with a strange, luminescent liquid. Will accepted it with a shaking hand, raising it to his lips. The liquid was cool and slightly viscous, with a tang that reminded him of citrus and copper. As he drank, he felt his pain and fatigue fade, replaced by a sense of warmth and clarity. The elder continued, "We will assign you a guide, Tharos, to help you navigate our world and learn our ways. In return, we ask that you share your knowledge and technology with us. But be warned, human. There are dangers on Andoria that even we do not fully understand. Tread carefully and do not venture beyond the village alone." As the elders began to disperse, Will noticed a group of Andorian warriors watching him from the shadows, their exoskeletons bristling with an array of wicked-looking blades and sleek, alien energy weapons. Their compound eyes glittered with a predatory intensity, and Will realized with a chill that he was not just a guest here, but a potential threat in their eyes. He would have to tread carefully and work to earn their trust if he wanted to survive on this strange and dangerous world. Will cradled the small stone figurine Tharos had given him, tracing the intricate carvings with his fingers. A child's stone doll, if Andorians had dolls. The delicate patterns carved into its surface were unlike anything he'd seen on Earth. Will couldn't help but marvel at the Andorians' artistry and advanced tool use even as anxiety gnawed at his gut. Over the past few days, as Will worked with Tharos to repair the damaged systems on his ship, he'd caught glimpses of the village's younger inhabitants. They seemed troubled, whispering in hushed clicks when the adults were out of earshot, mandibles twitching nervously. Too often Will caught the word Kavar repeated, the Andorian syllables sounding harsh and ominous. "What does it mean?" Will asked Tharos one evening as they soldered circuit boards together. "Kavar?" Tharos paused, compound eyes inscrutable. A children's story, nothing more. His tone brooked no further questions. But Will noticed other oddities in the village over time. The way the perimeter guards clutched their energy rifles, carapace quivering, the strange sigils etched around the village border, glowing a faint, sickly bioluminescent green. The Andorian warriors training with renewed intensity, blades flashing in the eerie twilight. Something had them all on edge. Will's eyes snapped open. A blood-curdling scream echoed through the night, jolting him from restless dreams. Heart hammering, he leapt from the woven hammock the Andorians had provided, barking his shin painfully on a twisted tree root. Cursing, Will stumbled out of the small guest hut to utter pandemonium. The village was in chaos. Andorians raced through the winding pathways between the organic dwellings, some clutching wailing offspring, others brandishing weapons. A strange, clicking alarm reverberated through the night air, setting Will's teeth on edge. Tharos materialized from the shadows, an angular rifle clutched in his upper appendages. He seized Will's arm in a vice grip, dragging him bodily towards the central chamber. "What's happening?" Will demanded, struggling to keep pace with the Andorian's ground-eating stride. Tharos clicked something harsh and guttural, shoving Will through the fleshy aperture, into the relative safety of the central chamber. He spun Will to face him, compound eyes boring into the humans with an intensity that sent chills down Will's spine. "Stay here," Tharos hissed in accented English. "Do not venture outside until we return." And then he was gone, disappearing into the screaming night with a phalanx of other warriors, the eerie glow of their weapons casting twisted shadows on the walls. Will stood frozen, heart pounding a staccato rhythm against his ribs. His fingers twitched, aching for the comforting weight of his own plasma pistol. The screams and strange otherworldly shrieks continued for an eternity, underscored by the zap and crackle of energy weapons, and other sounds Will couldn't place and didn't want to contemplate. And then, silence. An oppressive, absolute absence of noise that somehow rang louder than the chaos that preceded it. Will paced the confines of the central chamber, nerves strung tighter than piano wire. Every instinct screamed at him to run, to hide, to do something. But Tharos's warning held him in place, even as his imagination conjured nightmarish images of what might be happening beyond the twisted walls of his sanctuary. Just as Will's resolve crumbled and he reached for the door, it shuddered open. Tharos stumbled through, flanked by the other warriors. They looked like they'd been through hell. Ichor streaked their once gleaming carapaces, and more than a few sported gashes that wept dark fluid. But it was the look in Tharos's eyes that froze Will's blood. The Andorian grasped Will's shoulder with a trembling appendage, the other still clutching his rifle in a death grip. When he spoke, his voice was a ragged whisper. "We must speak with the elders. The threat we have feared for so long has returned, and I fear our village, and perhaps all of Andoria, is in grave danger." In the central chamber, the elders gathered, their compound eyes glinting with fear and uncertainty in the eerie bioluminescent light. Tharos stepped forward, his voice grave as he addressed the council. "The threat we face is not a new one, but an ancient enemy we thought long vanquished," he began, his mandibles clicking with tension. "The Khazar, a race of parasitic, shape-shifting aliens, have plagued Andoria for centuries. They feed on the life force of other beings, taking on their forms and memories to infiltrate and destroy civilizations from within." A murmur of unease rippled through the assembled Andorians. Will leaned forward, his mind racing as he processed this new information. Tharos continued, "We believe the Khazar extinct, wiped out in the Great Purge generations ago. But recent disappearances and strange behavior among some villagers suggest otherwise. I fear they have returned, and we must act swiftly to root them out before they can spread further." Will stood, ignoring the twinge of pain from his healing injuries. "I'll help in any way I can," he said, his voice steady despite the fear churning in his gut. "On Earth, we have a wide range of ecosystems and evolutionary adaptations. Maybe I can use that knowledge to find weaknesses in the Khazar's biology." Tharos regarded Will skeptically, his compound eyes unreadable. What could a human know of such things? "More than you might think," Will replied, meeting Tharos's gaze unflinchingly. "We've faced our own share of predators and parasites on Earth, and if there's one thing humans are good at, it's finding ways to survive." Tharos clicked his mandibles thoughtfully. "Very well, human. We will work together to devise a plan to detect and eliminate these infiltrators." As the elders disbanded, Will and Tharos huddled together, poring over ancient Andorian texts and biological data. But even as they worked, Will could feel the tension and paranoia growing in the village. Andorians eyed each other with suspicion, wondering if their neighbors, their friends, might be Khazar in disguise. Late one night, as Will pored over a crumbling scroll, a chill ran down his spine. The text spoke of the Khazar's origins, tracing their evolution back to a planet in the same system as Earth. A terrible realization dawned on him. The Khazar's shape-shifting abilities likely evolved from a common ancestor, shared with Earth species. Will's hands shook as he considered the implications. If the Khazar learned of Earth's existence, they could easily infiltrate human society, conquering from within just as they had done to countless other species. He turned to Tharos, his expression grim. "This isn't just about saving Andoria anymore. If we don't stop the Khazar here and now, my own people could be next." Tharos placed a comforting appendage on Will's shoulder. "Then we will fight, human. For Andoria and for Earth. The Khazar will not prevail, not while we still draw breath." Will nodded, a newfound determination burning in his chest. He had come to Andoria by accident, but now he knew his purpose. He would stand with the Andorians against this ancient threat, no matter the cost. The fate of two worlds hung in the balance. Nerves fraying, Will paced the dimly lit chamber. The strain of paranoia hung thick in the air, a miasma of fear and suspicion. Tharos entered, chitinous plates clicking. His eyes gleamed with unnatural light. "The trap is set, now we wait." Will nodded, muscles taut. They had rigged a holding cell with blinding strobes and sonic emitters, frequencies calibrated to shatter a Khazar's concentration, forcing them to revert to their true form. It was a desperate gambit. A sudden commotion shattered the tense silence. Andorian voices rose in anger, mandibles clacking. Will and Tharos rushed out to a scene of chaos. In the center of the gathered crowd stood an Andorian, carapace rippling, features melting like wax. A Khazar. The trap had worked. But the revelation tore open a schism. Many refused to believe their kin could be the enemy. Paranoia ignited into violence. Murmurs of assent rippled through the assembled Andorians. Fear sought a scapegoat. Tharos stepped forward, shielding Will. "The human is not our enemy, the Khazar—" "Lies," Zor-El snarled. "The Khazar are long dead. This is a ploy for power. You would set yourself above the council." As the village teetered on the brink of anarchy, a chilling wail pierced the night. All eyes turned to the perimeter, to the hellish light flickering between the twisting trees. "The Khazar," Tharos clicked, dread suffusing his voice. "They mass at our borders." In that moment the petty squabbles fell away. The true threat loomed, insidious and ravenous. Unity was the only path to survival. Will and Tharos slipped away as the Andorians rallied to bolster the defenses. Zor-El's eyes bored into their backs, dark with malice. A confrontation for another time. Mist curled around Will's boots as he crouched beside Tharos in the fungal undergrowth. The guttural clicks of Khazar echoed from the abandoned husk of a structure ahead. A trap within a trap. Tharos gripped his shoulder, a gesture of solidarity. "The Khazar would have come with or without you, but together we may stop them, for both our peoples." As if summoned by their resolve, the night erupted in a cacophony of shrieks. Shadows detached from the tree line, loping forward with predatory intent. Will and Tharos burst from cover, weapons thrumming. The ambush had been anticipated. Bolts of searing energy crackled through the air, finding flesh amid the chaos. Tharos fell, a smoking hole in his thorax. Will stood over his friend, blaster firing until the power cell ran dry. A hush fell, broken only by Will's ragged breaths and the sizzle of scorched chitin. The Khazar had withdrawn, but not fled. A single figure emerged from the darkness, wearing Tharos's face like an obscene mask. Will's blood ran cold. "Did you think your primitive weapons could stop us?" The Khazar's voice was a perversion of Tharos's, layered with malevolent harmonics. "We have consumed 1,000 species. Yours will be next." Will's mind reeled as the Khazar pressed its assault, not with claws and teeth, but with visions of Earth, his home, reduced to a withered husk, humanity, twisted into chittering abominations, enslaved to the Khazar hive mind. He felt his will eroding, his sense of self fraying at the edges. The Khazar's insidious whispers wormed into his psyche, promising oblivion. But in that darkest moment, Will found a spark of defiance. He thought of Tharos, of the Andorians and their fierce, stubborn resistance, of Earth, blue and verdant, teeming with vibrant life. He would not let the Khazar snuff out that light, even if he had to claw his way back from the precipice of madness, even if he had to sacrifice everything. With a roar of desperation and fury, Will launched himself at the Khazar, fingers scrabbling for purchase on its carapace. If he could just hold on, just long enough, maybe Tharos's people would find a way. The Khazar thrashed and hissed, its form rippling between Andorian and something unspeakable. Will felt his mind shudder at the contact, but he held fast. For Earth, for Andoria, for the future. Will's fingers shook as he wired the final components of the makeshift sonic emitter. The Khazar infiltrator thrashed against its bonds, hissing in a discordant mixture of Tharos's voice and something utterly alien. "You're too late, human," it spat, carapace rippling. "Our agents are already embedded on your world, waiting for the signal. Earth will fall just as Andoria has." Will's blood ran cold. He thought of his family, his friends, blissfully unaware of the danger lurking in their midst. The emitter hummed to life, and the Khazar screeched, its form dissolving into a writhing mass of tendrils and teeth. Tharos lay nearby, his breath shallow, ichor pooling beneath his shattered exoskeleton. Will knelt beside his friend, pressing a compress to the wound. "Hold on, Tharos, we'll get you help. Just stay with me." Tharos's compound eyes flickered. "Stop them, Will. Don't let our sacrifice be in vain." Will nodded, throat tight. He gathered the wounded Andorian in his arms and raced back to the village, the Khazar's revelations echoing in his mind. At the village center, a crowd had gathered, voices raised in confusion and anger. Zor-El stood at the forefront, his followers arrayed behind him. "The human has brought this plague upon us," Zor-El roared. "We must cast him out before it's too late." "You're wrong, Zor-El. The Khazar are the true enemy, and some of them are here in this village wearing the faces of our friends and family." Zor-El's mandibles twitched. "More lies. The Khazar are long extinct." Will held up the sonic emitter, his gaze hardening. "Then you won't mind proving it. Let's see if you can maintain your form under the same duress as the Khazar we captured." "I will not be subjected to this indignity," Zor-El hissed. "If you have nothing to hide, you have nothing to fear," Will countered. One by one, Will tested the villagers, the emitter's wail filling the air, and one by one the Khazar agents were exposed, their disguises melting away to reveal twisted, writhing abominations. Zor-El's form warped and buckled, his scream rising to a crescendo as his true nature was laid bare. The Andorians recoiled in horror, the truth sinking in like a blade. Chaos erupted. The exposed Khazar lashed out, tentacles whipping, jaws snapping. Will fought alongside the Andorians, sonic blasts and energy pulses illuminating the night. In the madness, Will found himself torn from the group, hurtling through a shattered wall into the central chamber. He struggled to his feet, ears ringing, vision swimming. A sinuous shape uncoiled from the shadows, towering over him. The Khazar queen, her eyes swirling with hypnotic patterns, her voice a sibilant whisper in his mind. "You fight with such passion, human, such strength, but you are alone here, cut off from your allies, isolated." Will felt her words worming into his thoughts, insidious tendrils probing at his resolve. "The Khazar have guided the Andorians' evolution for generations, cultivating them as a food source, as we will do with humanity. It is inevitable." Images flashed through Will's mind, Earth, his home, reduced to a husk. Its people little more than cattle for the Khazar. Will's heart raced, his pulse pounding in his ears. The Queen's offer was seductive, a siren song pulling at his weary soul, to rest, to surrender, to let go. "No." The word tore from Will's throat, raw and defiant. "You're not going to make me one of your mindless drones. I've seen what happens to the worlds you cultivate." He raised the sonic emitter, his finger hovering over the trigger. "Earth is off limits. Find somewhere else to feed." The Queen reared back, her eyes flashing with fury and fear. "You would doom your own kind. For what, these insects? A sense of morality as transient as the wind." Will's jaw clenched, his arm trembled, but his aim held steady. "No, I'd give my life to protect them, both our peoples. Because that's what it means to be human. We don't abandon our friends, and we don't surrender to monsters like you." The Queen lunged, her jaws gaping. A screech of rage tearing from her throat. Will fired, the sonic pulse slamming into the Queen's skull with a sickening crunch. The Queen's words echoed in Will's mind, insidious and tempting. A part of him yearned for the promised oblivion, to shed the weight of his struggles and fears. But as he stared into her swirling, hypnotic eyes, a flicker of defiance ignited in his heart. "No," he said, his voice raw but resolute. "You're wrong about humanity. Our strength doesn't come from some hive mind or false unity. It comes from our bonds, our diversity, our ability to stand together, even when we're different." The Queen's eyes flashed with fury, her form uncoiling like a whip. "Foolish creature," she hissed, "you doom yourself and your world with this pointless resistance." Will braced himself as she lunged, her serpentine body slamming into him with bone-crushing force. He felt his ribs crack, his vision blurring with pain as her coils tightened around him like a vice. Through the haze of agony, a memory surfaced, the makeshift sonic device he'd used against the Khazar infiltrator. His eyes darted to the central chamber's communication array, a desperate plan forming. Gritting his teeth, Will forced his battered body to move. He clawed his way up the Queen's writhing form, every inch a battle against her constricting grip. His fingers brushed against the control panel, slick with his own blood. The Queen's laughter reverberated through the chamber. "Pathetic. You only delay the inevitable." With a roar of defiance, Will slammed his hand down on the controls. A high-pitched whine filled the air, rising in intensity until it became a physical force. The Queen's laughter turned to a shriek of agony, her coils spasming as the sonic waves assaulted her. Will felt her grip loosen, and he wrenched himself free, tumbling to the floor in a heap. The Queen thrashed and convulsed, her form shimmering and distorting as the sonic barrage tore at her molecular structure. Seizing his chance, Will staggered to his feet and fled the chamber, the Queen's screams chasing him through the twisting corridors. He burst out into the village square, his heart pounding, his lungs burning. Tharos and a group of Andorian warriors stood amidst a scene of carnage, the broken bodies of Khazar infiltrators littering the ground. They turned as Will approached, their eyes widening at his battered appearance. "The Queen," Will gasped out. "She's in the central chamber. We need to—" His words trailed off as a chilling realization struck him. The Queen's words, her talk of humanity's assimilation, it wasn't just a threat. It was a revelation. "The Khazar," he said, his voice tight with urgency. "They're not just on Andoria, they're on Earth too, hidden, waiting for the signal to strike." Tharos stepped forward, his exoskeleton still bearing the marks of battle. "Then we must act quickly. We cannot allow the Khazar to gain a foothold on another world." Together they limped back to the central chamber, Will leaning heavily on Tharos for support. The Queen was gone, only a trail of viscous ichor marking her retreat. But the communication array still thrummed with power, the sonic frequency that had driven her back, still emanating from its speakers. "We can use this," Will said, his mind racing. "Amplify the signal, broadcast it across the planet. It'll weaken the Khazar, expose them for what they really are." Tharos nodded, his compound eyes glinting with determination. "And then we hunt them down one by one, until Andoria is free of their taint." As they worked feverishly to modify the array, boosting its power and range, Will couldn't shake a nagging feeling that they were missing something. The Khazar's abilities, their shape-shifting, their insidious influence, it all seemed too perfect, too evolved to be natural. And then, buried in the ancient Andorian texts they'd been poring over, they found it. A reference to a microscopic organism revered by the Andorians as the life-binder, the source of regeneration and healing. And a chilling addendum, hidden between the lines, the life-binder's true nature and its symbiotic bond with the Khazar. "It's not just the Khazar we're fighting," Will said, a grim realization dawning. "It's the life-binder too. They're two halves of the same whole, a perfect predator evolved over millennia." Tharos clicked his mandibles thoughtfully. "The life-binder, we thought it a blessing, but perhaps it is also a curse. A tool the Khazar have used to infiltrate and manipulate us for generations." Will nodded, his mind whirling with possibilities. "But maybe it's also the key to stopping them. If we can find a way to disrupt the symbiosis, to turn the life-binder against the Khazar." A distant explosion rocked the chamber, sending dust cascading from the organic walls. Tharos tensed, his head swiveling towards the sound. "The Queen," he hissed. "She rallies her forces for a final assault. We're out of time." Will's jaw clenched, a cold determination settling over him. "Then we make our stand here. We broadcast the signal, we draw the Khazar out, and we end this, one way or another." He met Tharos's gaze, seeing the same resolve mirrored in the Andorians' compound eyes. They knew the odds, knew the risks, but they also knew what was at stake. Not just the fate of Andoria, but of Earth and every other world the Khazar threatened. As the sounds of battle grew closer, as the Khazar's war cries echoed through the village, Will and Tharos stood side by side, ready to face the coming storm. They had the key to victory at their fingertips, a tenuous, unproven hope that could turn the tide. Now all they had to do was survive long enough to use it. Will's hands shook as he pored over the ancient Andorian texts, his eyes straining in the dim light of the hidden chamber. Tharos worked feverishly beside him, his chitinous fingers tracing intricate patterns on the pages. The sounds of battle echoed from above, a constant reminder of the Khazar forces besieging the village. "There must be something here," Will muttered, his voice tight with frustration. "Some clue, some hint about how the Lifebinder works." Tharos clicked his mandibles, a sound that Will had come to recognize as a sign of concentration. "The Lifebinder has been a part of our people for as long as our history records. It grants us strength, resilience, but the Khazar have twisted it, used it for their own ends." Will nodded, his mind racing. The Lifebinder, a microscopic symbiont that had evolved alongside the Andorians, granting them enhanced healing and regenerative abilities. But in the hands of the Khazar, it had become a tool of control and manipulation, fueling their shape-shifting powers and allowing them to exert influence over their hosts. As they dug deeper into the ancient records, a pattern began to emerge. References to a lost artifact, a crystalline device that could resonate with the Lifebinder's energy. A failsafe created by the Andorians' ancestors to purge the symbiont from an infected host without causing harm. "Tharos, look at this," Will said, his finger tracing a faded illustration. "This device, it could be the key. If we can find it, adapt it to the village's technology." Tharos's compound eyes widened, a glimmer of hope flickering in their depths. A weapon to sever the Khazar's connection to the Lifebinder, to free our people from their influence. They searched the chamber, their hearts pounding until at last they found it. A small crystalline device, its surface etched with intricate patterns. As Will held it in his hands, he felt a strange warmth, a pulsing energy that seemed to resonate with his very cells. "We need to get this to the central chamber," he said, his voice urgent. "Integrate it with the village's systems, broadcast its signal across the planet." Tharos nodded, his exoskeleton bristling with determination. They raced through the winding corridors, the sounds of battle growing louder with each step. But as they neared the central chamber, they found their path blocked by a group of Andorian elders, their eyes glazed, their movements jerky and unnatural. Will's heart sank as he realized the truth. These elders had been swayed by the Khazar's influence, their minds twisted by the shapeshifter's insidious whispers. "You cannot proceed," one of the elders rasped, his voice layered with discordant harmonics. "The Khazar are the future. They will guide us to enlightenment, to evolution." Will's grip tightened on the crystalline device. "No, they're manipulating you. They're parasites, feeding on your life force. We have to stop them." Tharos stepped forward, his energy rifle humming to life. "Please stand aside. We don't want to hurt you, but we must do this, for the sake of our people." The elders shambled forward, their movements becoming more erratic, more unnatural with each step. Will and Tharos exchanged a glance, a silent understanding passing between them. They had come too far, fought too hard to let the Khazar win now. They would fight not just against the shapeshifters, but against the very people they were trying to save. For the future of Andoria, for the fate of two worlds, they would stand together, even as the battle for survival reached its climax. With trembling hands, Will slammed the crystalline device into the central chamber's pulsing control panel. Tharos, his exoskeleton slick with ichor, worked feverishly to connect the artifact to the village's communication network. Sweat beaded on Will's brow as he watched the progress bar crawl across the screen. "Hurry," he urged, his voice strained. "The Queen's forces are breaking through." Tharos clicked his mandibles, compound eyes reflecting the eerie glow of the control panel. Almost there, just a few more seconds. A deafening boom shook the chamber, showering them with dust and debris. The Khazar had breached the outer defenses. Will's heart raced as he heard the screams of Andorian warriors, the sizzle of energy weapons, and the guttural roars of the Khazar. The progress bar hit 100%, and the artifact flared to life, bathing the room in a blinding, pulsing light. Will shielded his eyes as the energy surged through the communication network, a wave of power that swept across the village like a tsunami. In an instant, the battle outside changed. Khazar infiltrators, their disguises maintained by the Lifebinder symbiont, began to convulse and shift, their true forms revealing themselves like grotesque puppets shedding their skins. Andorian warriors, once under the sway of the Khazar's influence, blinked and shook their heads as if awakening from a dream. "It's working," Tharos exclaimed, his voice a mix of relief and wonder. But the victory was short-lived. A chilling screech tore through the chamber as the Khazar queen herself burst through the wall, her massive serpentine form coiling around the central pillar, her compound eyes, now a swirling vortex of rage and madness, fixed on Will. "You!" she hissed, her voice a discordant symphony of stolen voices. "You have ruined everything." Will stood his ground, the modified Andorian artifact gripped tightly in his hands. "It's over, Your Majesty," he said, surprised at the steadiness of his own voice. "Your control is broken. The Andorians are free." With a roar she lashed out at Will, tendrils of dark energy coiling from her form like a nest of vipers. Will felt the cold grip of her power, felt it seeping into his mind, seeking to overwhelm his will. Gritting his teeth, he poured all his focus, all his determination into the artifact. The device pulsed in his hands, its light growing brighter, hotter, until it burned like a miniature sun. The queen screamed, her form rippling and bulging as the artifact's energy tore at the life-binder within her. Will's vision blurred, his mind assaulted by a kaleidoscope of memories, both his own and the queen's. He saw the Khazar's true history, saw the twisted symbiosis they had forced upon the life-binder, saw the countless worlds they had consumed. But amidst the darkness, he also saw hope, the bonds he had formed with Tharos and the Andorians, the resilience of life in the face of even the most overwhelming odds. With a final desperate surge of willpower, Will channeled everything he had into the artifact. The device released a blinding burst of energy, a pulse that shattered the Queen's connection to the life-binder like a hammer blow. The Queen's form collapsed, imploding in on itself like a star-going supernova. And then silence. Will stood amidst the debris, the artifact still glowing in his hands. Tharos limped to his side, his exoskeleton cracked, but his eyes alight with triumph. Around them, the Andorian warriors raised a cheer as the last of the Khazar fled into the wilderness. But even as they celebrated, Will knew that this was only the beginning. The Lifebinder's secrets and the true extent of the Khazar's influence on the galaxy had yet to be fully unraveled. The battle had been won, but the war was far from over. The acrid scent of smoke still hung heavy in the air as Will and Tharos picked their way through the rubble of the Andorian village. Twisted spires of chitin and bone jutted from the debris like the ribs of some great fallen beast. Will's heart ached at the sight of the destruction, at the lives lost and the once vibrant community reduced to ashes. But the Andorians were a resilient people. Already they had begun to rebuild, their chitinous exoskeletons glistening with sweat as they cleared away the wreckage and salvaged what they could. Tharos directed the efforts with a grim determination, his compound eyes scanning the ruins for any sign of further threat. In the days that followed, Will pored over the ancient texts and data they had recovered, searching for any clue that might help them understand the true nature of the Lifebinder. The more he learned, the more he realized the full extent of the organism's influence. It had shaped the evolution of countless species across the galaxy, granting them extraordinary abilities, but at a terrible cost. "The Khazar were just the beginning," Will said, his voice hollow with dread. "There are others out there, species twisted and corrupted by the Lifebinder's power. We have to stop it, Tharos. We have to find a way to neutralize its influence before it's too late." Tharos clicked his mandibles thoughtfully, his compound eyes reflecting the glow of the data screens. "It won't be easy," he said. "The Lifebinder is ancient and its reach is vast. But perhaps in understanding its origins, we may find a way to counter its effects." And so they began their journey, venturing out into the uncharted reaches of space in search of answers. They encountered strange new worlds and alien species, some benevolent, others hostile. They delved into ruins older than the stars themselves, deciphering the cryptic writings of long-dead civilizations. Slowly, piece by piece, they began to unravel the Lifebinder's secrets. They learned of its ability to adapt and evolve, to integrate itself seamlessly into the biology of its hosts. They discovered the twisted remnants of species that had succumbed to its influence, their once proud civilizations reduced to mindless, shambling hordes. But as they drew closer to the truth, they realized that the key to stopping the Lifebinder might lie within the very thing that made it so dangerous. If they could harness its adaptive abilities, turn them against the corrupted strains. "It's risky," Tharos warned, his voice heavy with concern. "We would be playing with forces beyond our understanding." Will nodded, his jaw tight with determination. "I know, but what choice do we have? If we don't stop the Lifebinder, how many more worlds will fall? How many more species will be lost?" In the end, it was Will who made the sacrifice. He allowed himself to be infected with a modified strain of the Lifebinder, one that they had engineered to seek out and neutralize the corrupted versions of the organism. He felt it take hold, felt his body and mind begin to change in ways he could never have imagined. It was a terrible burden, but one he bore willingly, for the sake of the Andorians, for the sake of Earth, for the sake of every species threatened by the Lifebinder's insidious influence. In a final bittersweet moment, Will bid farewell to Tharos and the Andorians. He entrusted them with the task of rebuilding their world, of safeguarding the knowledge they had gained. And then he set out into the void, a lone figure against the darkness, ready to spend the rest of his days hunting down and eradicating the Lifebinder's corruption. As Tharos watched Will's ship disappear into the depths of space, he felt a profound sense of loss, mingled with a glimmer of hope. He knew that the true enemy was not the Khazar or the Lifebinder, but the endless march of evolution itself, the relentless drive of life to change and adapt and survive. But he also knew that as long as there were those like Will, those willing to sacrifice everything for the greater good, there would always be a chance for a better tomorrow. No matter how dark the night, there would always be a dawn waiting on the other side. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.